Welcome to the Red Heart Wisdom Show. I'm so excited today to have two amazing individuals with me. I met them a couple years ago and through a conference, and they are just individuals up to doing amazing, wonderful work for the world and humanity. So we have Louis here and Sandra here. Over time, we've become friends as well. And also I'm in their community. So Louis and Sandra founded the Care First Innovation Network, where their philosophy is about care first, right? Everything starts with care first. Whatever we're doing, it's around care first. And I remember when Louis, you shared about that, I was so excited, like, yeah, so simple. It just, whatever you're doing, just start with care first, and then the world will transform. So I was excited also, to meet Sandra at a conference, and my memory of Sandra and still continue is, Sandra is always this gentle, kind, loving soul. I always have this feeling of being, whole and enveloped and loved by you. So I'm so excited to have both of you here today on this show to share, actually, your experience as an intuitive, I would say, reader, counselor around that aspect.
Yes.
And for those who are watching, I kind of knew they were into that, but I kind of found out a little bit more about it recently only. Because we've been working more on the Care First Innovation Network, and then We Worldwide Network work. So what I understand from the both of them too, both of you, that it was through all this your insight into this other world that started all your movement, right? So maybe later you could share more about how that went and what happened. So I'm excited to have both of you here.
Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Awesome. So I'm not, this question is for both of you. Feel free who wants to go first. I'm really curious, like, how did you discover that you are, clairvoyant, you have all this psychic abilities? Like, what was your process and journey like?
Yeah. Well, would you like to start, darling?
Ladies first then.
Ladies or goddesses first?
Well, I think when we did meet all those years back, it came to light that I'd come out of an abusive childhood. So I wasn't conscious of that. But when I was 17 and I went to work in the fashion trade, I found myself being introduced to different people who were very connected into this perception world, into psychic reality, guides, healers, helpers, that kind of thing. And it hit me so naturally. And I think it was a savior, really. It was a savior because everything in life was so normal and abnormal at the same time, so terrifying. And I was so inward, but being very, very inward, it actually helped me to discover what this world is like when you trust your instincts and your intuition and your vision. And I think for myself, I believe everybody has this natural, intuitive, built-in sense, but unless it comes to us on our path, we don't necessarily always choose to go down that path. And in the years that I found it, it was still very hush-hush. It wasn't as broad as healing and therapies are in these days. So it was a more of a secretive thing, and I joined classes to help me to develop how I perceive things, what they mean to me. And in the practice of doing that, I realized that everybody in the group was developing their own unique style of how to translate what they perceive. So we might meditate on a golden tree, but everybody had their own point of view, and the journey that they went through was quite extraordinary. And I think that that's, in a way, I had built it up to such a degree that it was completely natural in me. and registering that at the age of 17, I'd already been introduced to my role in this life. But at that time, I wasn't quite sure what I could do with it, where to take it. So that only began really when I met Louis.
Yeah, so for me, in my youth also wasn't easy. I lost my father when I was 8.5. He was a brilliant Dutch PhD. I had a younger brother and younger sister. And I lost him in a car accident. My mother, who came from Indonesia, had been in a Japanese concentration camp with her mother and couldn't really handle the death of my father. So in growing up, somehow I became the father. I took care of my mother and brother and sister, and there I learned to hold space for people. My mother had to go into a mental institution 3 times as I grew up. But it wasn't disturbing me. It was not easy, but I learned to hold space. So then when I left home, also because of my sort of caring side, and because I had a sort of dream of wanting to become a doctor, I started studying medicine, but after 3 weeks of being on the university, I felt that that was not my path. Then I found myself becoming very engaged with all the issues that are going on this planet, and with a very political direction. So by the time I turned 25, I felt that I couldn't see all the possibilities of resolving things through politics. Around that time, I'd met a new girlfriend from the United States who started talking about spirit in the trees, spirit in the earth, etc., etc. And I thought that was quite fun. And I thought, oh, well, this spirituality, I'll deal with that when I'm 65. You know, then you can sort of lean back and sort of look over your life. But before I knew it, by meeting a movement in the Netherlands, in the United States, that were doing one of those Eastern meditations in the 60s, I saw that there was something going on with the people there that I hadn't seen before, like they had a sort of an extra level of consciousness. And so then I got into meditation and into spirituality. So then by the time I was 27, by that time I was really investigating this whole world. I met a woman in the Netherlands who said that she'd been trained on a psychic school in Berkeley, and that she could see my aura and chakras, and she would give me a psychic reading. Well, I was also quite critical at that time around things, but the experience of what she was doing with me just totally baffled me. I could hardly understand how it is possible that someone that I didn't know was so clear about me. She was not crossing my boundaries. She was delivering the information in a good way. And then she shared with me that she was trained on a psychic school. I'd never heard of that. So as I then kept searching for answers through exploring spirituality, I felt a lot about these worlds. And then at some point I thought, well, you know, how can you make all this real in your life? Your higher self, angels, all these different things. So I thought, well, maybe I should do a training like that. So then in 1980, I went over to the States. And I went to a psychic school called Heart Song, where you learn to develop whatever capacity is naturally active in you, whether it's clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairhearing. I even feel we have clair smelling and clair tasting. And I never really liked the word psychic that much, so I love to talk about the perception of our sensitive nature. But there I learned to give psychic readings just like this woman had learned. And it all was very natural to me. I remember when I traveled across the ocean to go to that school, I thought to myself, what's going to happen now? I'm going to see this unseen, unknown world, you know. I also had a little bit of longing for it, but there was a little bit apprehensive, I think. But then when I was on the school, it was all so normal and so natural. I returned to the Netherlands, and then I started my own practice. So I was mainly clairsentient, not clairvoyant. Sandra's very clairvoyant. So I started in 81, my own practice of assisting people with their life. And what's quite important there to share is that because I'd also seen a fair amount of nonsense going on in these areas, I felt that I had to ask the question to myself, if somebody comes by for a psychic reading, where does the information come from? And how do I know that it really serves them? I know that that was working accurately on the school, but they hadn't taught us what the mechanisms of that were. So I had to work that out myself. I was 31, so I sort of thought, well, I guess, yeah, we have a higher self, and I believe that all the information that you read of a person sits in their energy, and I'm quite sure that the higher self governs all that, and I have the feeling that in the higher self, there we have our freedom. So also the spiritual world is supposed to serve us there. They can't just tell you what to do, because you have to learn. But that is the sacred space of that other person. And that's where all the information is. So then when I started my practice, I would tell people that I was going to do the following thing. And that is, before we start, I would connect myself to the higher being, to the higher self, and say to that part, I am here to serve you. Can you give me the information that you need at this moment in time? And then I knew that the whole space was protected and guarded. I would never say to people that I am seeing the truth. I just told them how I worked. And then I would share the things that I was aware of, and we could talk it over together. And it also gave me the space as somebody who was just starting to take the risk of, people come with really serious problems and you see something about their mother. Well, I don't know their mother. So how do I dare to say anything about it? But because I directed the energy in the right way, I could assume that probably something about their mother was a good thing to share. And then I began to see that information was given to me in these readings in such an organic manner. It was beautiful. And that what I really liked about the work is that, if I would give a psychic reading, I was always ask people first to tell me what is going on, where are you, what have you learned? And then we would talk things over, and at some point I would say, shall I have a look? Then if I had a look, I felt that I was dealing with their lives, their personal lives, their mystery. And so the answers were coming out of their inner space together with the support of their guides. And so I started that in 81. In 83, I went to Glastonbury, and there I met Sandra, and we were introduced to each other doing the same work. So then after we met, we started doing these readings together as a man and a woman. That was very powerful for people, but also special for me, because I'm very intimate with people and very precise. So just to let another person come into that process, I wouldn't just do that. But Sandra and I were totally attuned to each other. I could fall asleep while she was working, and I knew that the things were fine.
Oh, that's awesome. Both of you sharing your story and also share how you met. And, both of you shared a couple of things too. One of the things that I remember, Sandra, you mentioned as well about, you're a bit apprehensive but yet trusting, like that whole process, and Louis too, right? Because I think that's what I find. I remember myself too going through that process. It's like, really, am I making this up? Am I crazy? And, I think probably many more years ago, it's more challenging than now. Now it's a little bit more open. Yet I do find, I hear this often too, like people are doubting themselves. And I agree with you, this is a gift that we all have innately, yet we're not tapping into it. So I would like to kind of also hear, what was your process like, working through that, or your journey like, so those who are listening kind of also know that they're not alone, or they're not, crazy, or whatever their process or journey is like right now. Because I do get people reaching out and say, I'm seeing things, I don't know what's happening, I don't know how to make sense of this, right? So I'd love for both of you to share a little bit about that,
Yeah, I can. we also give trainings to help people with developing that perception. So we did at some point in Scotland, and it was really nice. There were like 6 or 7 people, but there was a mother who was on holiday, or it was school holiday, so that her children were at home. She said, "I'd really like to do this course." It was a whole week. "Can I bring my kids?" Yeah, okay. Well, you wouldn't believe it. These kids, they didn't lose attention for 1 second. So the mechanism that you see in those workshops, when I start the workshop, I will do a round with people and I say, "Can you share about your sensitivity?" Well, maybe the first person goes, "Sensitivity, what do you mean?" But as soon as somebody begins to talk about it, everybody gets it. And then it goes round the circle and the whole thing opens up. Then we start taking people into exercises where they're asked to give a reading to another person. So what you see happening in the human psyche is this. The place that controls everything with most of us is the mind. And for the mind, all this stuff is like, come on. You know, you asked me a question about your fear and now I see a blue earth. How is that connected? So, but I think it's also very good that the mind is critical or even scared or asked, because it makes us more conscious. I think further back in time, we might have been into these same levels of experience, but maybe, I don't want to say that in a denigrating manner, maybe on a little bit more primitive level, not that conscious. So with the mind, you really have to get a clear understanding of what these things mean. And so when people are doing their exercises, then we sit in the circle and we say, "Well, did you have questions about things that you saw?" And then we're trying to help them to understand the pictures. The difficulty with understanding the information is that it's not that easy to grasp with your mind. You somehow have to feel the picture and draw the information out of your heart and your intuitive body. That is what I have seen. So I think what also makes it a little bit difficult for people is that we haven't been educated to be with this part of ourselves. And also in the world, there can be a lot of fear and suspicion around it. So in the collective, it's not always that welcome. And a lot of people also, when I went to the psychic school, when they arrive there, they sort of think they're crazy. And then slowly everybody finds out that maybe we're not.
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough. I was definitely led to meet these different people step by step. So I had the safety of a group within which I could practice what I was seeing and what I was feeling. And I was quite insecure. And I didn't always want to share within the group what I was seeing and what I was feeling, but I knew that it was quite high, and it led me to understand that I have a whole other intelligence inside of me, and I recognized the kind of things that I was seeing were exactly belonging to me and my nature. But as I said before, if you don't have a method of being able to practice this on a regular basis, you don't begin to see exactly what your pattern is. Mine very clearly belongs to what I call the inner temple. So a sacred place of learning. So it opened up in me something that I feel is exactly me, exactly why I'm here. And everything that in the training was taking me along that journey the whole time. So I felt very much at home. And we're talking mid to late 60s. So as I say, it was not so open in those days. Maybe more people were doing it behind closed doors. But for me, it was very exciting. And I think because I call it safety, the more and more I studied with this very small group, we were introduced to the main guides that were leading the group. But that in turn led me to figure out who my personal guides were and are. And that gave me a whole other sense of community. Community down here on the ground was very threatening. School was horrendous. The teachers didn't know who any of us in the class were. It was very, very, very painful, especially coming out of an abused household. So you're on edge the whole time, totally insecure, have got no clue who you are. Nobody's addressing the me inside of me. So to find that I had another community in other worlds, guides, angels, people who are there, not solely for me, but for all of us, led me to feel that, oh, I have another family. And it was for the first time I could walk down the street late at night in the dark, feeling that somebody got my back. I'm all right, I'm safe. There are many more beings than the ones that I know day to day here. So yes, for me, it opened up a whole world of safety in a world that is completely unsafe. And I do understand for people that, you know, if you have a few experiences at home or by yourself, it might be very good to find a way to develop with others. And what we always did was, if we were running a group, we very often would use it as a healing potential. How can we heal? What does everybody need in the group? Sometimes it was about the town or the city in which they all live, and it would produce extraordinary experiences that, like a great angel that was governing their city, but it woke everybody up. Oh, this is where we live. So then you've got something to focus on and practice who you actually are. So my specific way is very, very visual. It's like seeing a whole movie running in front of me. And I have to pick out the essence of what this movie is and try to deliver that. So the pictures are one thing, but then I have to back it up with, does my heart feel that this is true? What does my head tell me about it? And what do my feelings say? So there's a whole support system working in me to help clarify what I'm seeing and what it might mean for this person or this particular group. Louis is quite the opposite. Louis very rarely sees something, but he's so open in his feeling body. So together, we really made a beautiful team, because we could trust what each other was bringing and complement that. We could go to completely other worlds, but they always complemented what the person was looking for and how it was helping them.
Thank you for sharing. I love that, you know, having a community, a support as you walk through this process and journey. It's important from what I'm hearing, because so that you can actually share, you know, your experience and not thinking that you're alone and you're crazy, which is a big thing. I remember when I first started, that was like, you know, so for someone who is perhaps experiencing all this right now, what would be, I have two questions, but I'll ask this one first. What would be, you know, so I heard that you said, you know, get to a community. What I'm hearing too, it's good to probably continue to develop. Is there any like daily thing that they could practice at home for now that you could suggest, so that, you know, they could at least not think they're crazy, or get to, I've heard also people get confused during those times as well, and it becomes really challenging kind of being in their daily life as well. So if you could share a little bit about that, would be great for the listeners and audience.
Well, I think the really important thing is to accept what you experience and don't worry about it too much. Just understand that when it's beginning to open up, you live in two worlds at the same time. That's often the consciousness. Because when you understand that we perceive the physical world through physical organs, and that's what we're grounded in with a mind, and then you get this other world coming in, often they call it comes in through a still small voice. So it comes in often in a very thin way, and the mind doesn't always know what to do with it. You also will slowly begin to experience another part of yourself that you're not familiar with. So I would definitely say that if somebody isn't naturally comfortable with the experiences that they have, I would definitely go and find others, either just to share it with each other, but especially good to be with people who are at home with this. Like when we do our course, people relax in an hour because suddenly the whole world opens up and everybody can relax into it. And yes, of course, if I would meet somebody personally and they would ask, what could I do on my own at home? I think I would make the instructions specific to them, what they would need, how they could relax themselves. But I would say accept it, don't worry about it, and just take a little step back so that you notice what you've seen, and then try to find a way with others to come to an understanding or relaxation, but not to worry.
I think what helped me in my little group all those years ago, the teacher himself always began by asking us to call in our highest self. And I think then from there, I learned, or I decided, taught myself, whatever I chose, to actually protect myself. So I would call in my highest nature. And then I would call in those guides or guardians that are looking after me in my life. And asking for protection, because it's true, there can be some difficulties. I met a few as I was learning how to do this. And it can make you a little bit unstable, and why would I be seeing that kind of thing? But once I knew how to really sort of focus in and probably now I would say really work from the heart and make sure that you're protecting your own heart sufficiently, I think people begin to find their own keys and their own ways that they would love to use that protection. But then you get accustomed to that sort of setup. And in that setup, that's how I began to recognize who my specific guides were. So then I would call them. I knew them by name or whatever. And I would call them and say, I want to practice this at home now by myself. Please make sure that I'm protected, protect my back, hold me on the earth. I began to feel safe because I was controlling it all. I wasn't demanding, but I knew that I was kind of in charge of what I would receive and that it would help me. And something else I wanted to mention, it's gone from my mind. Using my mind, you see, that's my intuition. Well, I'll come back to it. Carry on anyway.
Yeah.
I'll
there's maybe one thing that I can share that might help everybody. When we do the course, I help people to set their energy up in the right way for a reading. It's always the same. So when I think of people that you're talking to that would like to understand more what you could do at home, my advice definitely would be ground yourself. So make sure that you make a proper connection with the earth that holds you in your body, so you're not out of your body. Center yourself in your heart, and then make a connection to your light, to your higher self. And just hold yourself in those three spaces. And you're in a balanced place of heaven, earth, and heart. And let your heart be your guide. Because of course the difficulty with all this is that you don't just enter a world of light. When you open up to that other side, there's everything. that we have in our world, light and dark.
Mhm.
And so there are also really funny things can happen with people. Trust when it doesn't feel right. Immediately trust it. That inner sense is so clear. I mean, I have one thing with past lives that we are very familiar with. If people talk about a past life and my body relaxes, then I'm almost 100% sure that they come from the right place. But sometimes people say something, your whole body goes like, oh, I don't know. That is the thing to trust. And I think I once said it to a woman who came to me for a reading when I just started. And I said to her, okay, I'm sitting here giving you this reading. I said, now, what do you have as a way of measuring what's coming out of me? I said, trust your guts. Just trust yourself. When you listen to me, feel it in your body and heart. When it feels right, breathe. When it doesn't feel right, listen. And it is actual perception. It's because I'm so sensitive. One thing I can say about sensitive or psychic perception, I believe that we always see, hear, know, feel at the same time. So I can give somebody a reading and say, I see a golden angel behind you, but I don't see the gold and I don't see the angel. But I know that she is there for sure. So the whole organ works like that. But we perceive energy. And so that intuitive sense senses the quality of information that a person gives you or that you perceive on the inside. That's your guard. Love sees clearly. Always, always, always. And that to me is the key to the whole thing, a foundation of love. And also just to chill out. If you've seen things, you think, oh, what was all this? Let it go. But when it has an importance, it'll come back to you. It will keep talking to you.
Yeah, I think that's really good to remind people that it's okay to just let it go, not, having to hang on. And I've also experienced, and I get this often, because I'll be telling, and I know when I first started, I was apprehensive to like sharing what I'm seeing, but now I'm open to share. I see angels or I see goddesses, and yet, I get questioned like, how do you know that's an angel you really see, right? Did you make it all up, how certain are you that, you're just, trying to make escape or whatnot? So I think the reason I'm sharing this, because I think for some people, the mind, like you talk about, the mind is just so strong. And, is there any way to distinguish? Because I've also know someone who will go into this, oh, yeah, I see them. Then the next minute, no, I made them up. And then they go, oh, yeah, because it's happening. Then the next minute, no, I think I made the whole thing up, right? So they kept ping-ponging between the heart and the mind. Yeah, so I'm just curious about your thoughts about that.
I think it's really important. There have been lots of times, especially with some of our longer term friends, who haven't found it very easy to attune and see things. Especially together with me, we dream and love the fairy kingdom, and they say, oh, I'd love to see a fairy or an elf, okay, let's sit down and see where we can go. So I learned quite early on that the threshold between imagination and perception is incredibly thin.
Yeah.
So very many times I would say, let your imagination go where you want to go, because you are the one that's making up the story. And the first time that happened to me, way back when I was just 17, was because I said to someone, well, I can do that. I can imagine this and this and this. Well, I said something in so much detail, it is definitely not the kind of thing you'd make up. And the woman that I was learning a lot of things from looked at me and she said, I don't think you imagined that. She said, that's perception. So then I could begin to see how those two things work, and that imagining is really, really important. That's what we do with kids. When we're small, we go out in the garden and we imagine that we're the great princess, and then there comes this big dragon and you have to fight the dragon. Well, all that is true. We're dealing with that, our emotions and our fears and our anger. The story that we make up is exactly us and what's going on. So with my girlfriends in more recent years, we would go down that track, and I'd say, okay, let's just imagine that we're in a beautiful woodland and there's a little river and we're walking along the side of the river. And before I could say anything, somebody'd say, oh yes, and by the side of the river, there's this wonderful little gnome with a red hat and he's fishing. And then the other girlfriend would say, oh, but there's a fairy with silver shoes on. Well, they were off. They just needed the company and the comfort of, we're going to imagine this together. But that imagining is absolutely real. And the thing that I was forgetting just now was, it's not that easy, even when Louis and I have done this for so many years, to do certain things for yourself. So we always call each other and say, I need to look at something. Will you be there as a space holder, but also as a mirror? And can you ask me questions? But what I have felt, if I've wanted to do something on my own, it definitely helps if I write. And it's like making a little story. I can be writing to myself, or it could be a song. It could be anything that actually captures it in a few words that I can come back to and look at later and decide, what does that mean? How is it appropriate? And if you think about all the great masters who wrote wonderful music, where were they getting it from? They had to trust the inflow, the same as all the songwriters and the people who write fantastic books. It's coming in, it's coming up, it's coming through. That's all our intuition, and we have to trust that all the time.
Yeah. And it is really interesting, Annie, because one element is quite important to be conscious of, and that is that this whole world that we talk about can be very scary and threatening to certain parts of the human psyche. That's why you get things, people write really negative articles about spirituality, or even if they would listen to what Sandra just shared about her and her girlfriends, they might say, oh, what is all this? Because they're not feeling what she is sharing. As soon as you feel Sandra, then you know that there is something really special going on. And from that fear, people react. From that fear, the world is filled with doubt, and it flows right through the collective. So we're all dealing with that to whatever extent inside of ourselves and with our friends. I find the question that you ask really important, and that is like, what creates the security in relationship to perception? I know that Sandra brought me back to an experience of being 4 years old, something I'd not remembered at all. And I suddenly remembered myself seeing things etherically around my father. And as a 4-year-old, I had no question about what I perceived, like how children can be. I saw it, it is there. In that world, I was completely secure. So there is a place where we can be completely grounded in that perception. Yeah. How I came slowly to my security is simply through practice and by always being really grounded. So if I would give readings, like I said, I would never say it's the truth. I would find out what the reality is of the things that I shared in people's lives. So more and more, all these pieces of information that I got showed themselves to be real. And that helped me to go, this is making sense. And then I think it took me 10 years to shift from the experience of being in two worlds, this physical world and then this other thing, into feeling that I live in one world where both are together. And one other thing I'd like to add to it, this is just a really nice story. When I had worked maybe for 8 or 9 years, I read an article in a Dutch newspaper of a psychiatrist who had made a special place in mental institutions for people that he called psychic.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of everybody being crazy, if he had the feeling that people were he acknowledged that, right? I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I need to talk to this guy. So I visited him and we just talked. And as we were talking more and more, I had something inside of me that really felt I wanted to say something. So it suddenly came out. So I said to him this, look, I've been working now for 10 years with all this psychic and spiritual gobbledygook, I said. But what I'm realizing that all of it is nothing else than my normal self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is really where it sits. Because the beauty for me, one of the really beautiful things of this sensitive perception, that it relates to the heart. It tunes into the child within. It tunes in to our deepest essence. And into our sensitive nature. So often also in the heart, we can feel hurt or vulnerable. It touches that place. So slowly, we can build it up. And that's why I say, for me, love in the heart and love in the body is the foundation for just, now I can be so secure over things that I see because my whole body feels it. I experience what I'm seeing. So what do you want to tell me?
I love it. And, you just reminded me my process, because I think when I started doing personal development work, I started sharing a lot more stuff. And that's kind of how I became more and more sensitive over the years, and more connected to myself, which is the self. And that's actually our true nature. That process of discovery. And I love what you talk about, Sandra, too, the thin line about imagination and perception. I love that. I'm actually going to play some of that with my kids too. My children are quite intuitive, I would say. My eldest one is very, he sees elves and all that, so he sees colors and auras. The younger one, both of them, all 3 kids are fairly, but the elder one's a little bit more. So I'm going to, continue to expand that with them. And now, both of you talk a little bit too about, and I think for those who are listening, because once you open up, right, you open to the light and darkness too. And I think that was also when I started that process. When that was my inquiry, because my part of my inquiry was protection. Why do we need to protect in that realm? But then through my journey, I understood. Oh, okay, I got it. It's important to protect, right? To feel safe and to protect my space. So yet I think it'd be good for both of you to share, a little bit about this light and darkness piece so that whoever's listening understand that part. What's there, because they might be thinking about that.
And maybe say, so before I go into light and darkness, all because of course you can have black magic. I heard of a guy in the Netherlands who could blow people's bicycle tires up with his mind. So you get these really weird things. But of course, these forces all can be used accurately and not accurately. And it always will be the human ego, the intention, the lack of serving. So also when you deal with people, just watch their authenticity and their integrity, because that will, again, that love in that heart will regulate everything in the right kind of way. The darkness on the spiritual level is the same as the darkness psychologically in people. Emptiness, aggression, manipulation, and it can manifest itself, into all sorts of things. I've always felt completely protected, but I think where I maybe want to go first is just the darkness inside of ourselves. So what Sandra shared, when we started working together, she would go towards the inner essence of people and and their talents and all that kind of thing. And then I was more working with how you make that real on this planet. And then I was dealing often with their pains, their difficulties. And often we will see those in darkness. My fear, my anger, my jealousy, all these kind of things. And again, I just embrace all those parts, love those parts and help them to transform. So that darkness to me is totally and utterly positive. That's just dealing with it in the right way psychologically. Where I think funny things can happen spiritually, and I haven't experienced much of that, is when people begin to manipulate the energies for their own power. And I think a lot of people are not really dealing with that. It doesn't happen that often, that's what you meet. But it is always good to protect yourself in whatever way that feels comfortable. And I used to use a fair amount of protection in the first 10 years. But then personally, when I got so deeply grounded in my heart, like love was everywhere, I didn't need it anymore. But you can sense it. So when I meet people who have difficult experiences, then I just try to assist them with the experiences that they have. And yes, it can be, also people in mental institutions who deal with entities that can be very, very difficult. It's not an easy arena. But that's not what most people deal with when you open up, because we're also naturally protected. I think the greatest worry that people will probably have when you open up is simply being worried about opening up. What is that other world? I'm not accustomed to it.
Yeah. I can remember in my early days, maybe before I was part of an ongoing group, I would practice a few things at home on my own. And there were a couple of scary moments. I thought, oh, I don't know what I'm feeling. And so I'd stop doing whatever I was doing and think about it and decide to do it differently the next day. But it was quite important for me to register, I think, that what we might call the darkness, I think a lot of times are things that we haven't actually dealt with as people, as humanity even. We aren't dealing with the fear inside of us. So in my own youth, with the abuse that went on, there was nobody to turn to. And so it became a family secret. Well, all of that sits in the darkness. It sits in a lot of pain and sadness. And that, had to be worked out later on. And fortunately, I could wait opening that memory up until the years when I was together with Louis. So we had the safety to look at that together. But then gradually I began to realize, and I say it very carefully, I think that will have strengthened me sufficiently to be able to do this kind of work. So a lot of people who have been through domestic abuse have been coming to us over the years for help. And there is a lot of darkness that we're trying to unfold. And I think I have learned how to recognize a darker force together with a lighter force in the same space, but they're both our friend. They're both natural. And I can hold space with them both and know that they're here to teach us, and they're here for us to help them and find the balance inside of ourselves and in the work that we do, all of us. So it is a case of trying to walk hand in hand with the fear and the light and not make a trouble with either of them. Because, of course, if you see an angel in bursting light, that can be as scary as seeing some dragon with, unusual character. You think, oh, I don't want to look at that. But the light can be just as scary if you're not accustomed to how to handle it. So I think those two energies are absolutely crucial in everything that we're dealing with on the planet at the moment, where the darkness is, where the light is, and how do we walk that center path and try to hold it all as the things that we're learning about, and how to act within that mainstream middle road.
It's a really important thing, Sandra, because I think, Annie, and this is a deep thing and probably very personal. I have not been able to find judgment over people's behavior, I think from March 1990 onwards. And that was because I wasn't feeling that the dark was against me anymore. I felt that dark and light are the ground in which we learn. And the darker forces have a job. It might be their job to help us not to be ourselves, and the light's job is to help us to be ourselves. But that in that tension field, they both have a function. So I think that if I give the example of that crazy guy who could blow up somebody's tires, bicycle tires, he's of course in a pretty crazy space. But he's a human being, and for some reason he's doing that weird stuff. Well, we see people doing the most terrible things on this planet. Yeah. And this is Louis, have learned to embrace all of it. Not that I say that the things are good, but I can't separate myself from it. I feel that I have the same potential to be destructive or negative as anybody else. That is how I feel it. Therefore, I can hold everyone. You know, somebody's committed terrible crimes. I've seen it on television too. You know, they end up in jail, and then after years they begin to realize what they'd be doing. But if they then begin to tell you about their youth, terrible. So you feel that you can hold them. And that holding space of love for everything that's light and dark, I think is a really important thing. But it is a personal conclusion. I'm not putting that on anybody. Louis has decided that I can embrace it all. But I can definitely share with you that it makes my life very loving and very comfortable.
Well, thank you, both of you. You know, I think what you just shared, both of you, about that perspective that, I mean, in many ways, you know, we term it darkness, but it's here to grow us, right? And then, but in the process of everything, it's love that envelopes all of it. You know, for me, in my journey too, I've discovered that I remember one time I was on the plane and I had this whole download about, and I wrote this down. It started with an inquiry why we're here. And it came out through the process of all experiences was just so that we could really understand love, expand in love, experience love, regardless of which end we're in. You know, either we were the perpetrator or the victim, or any role that we play, so that at all perspective, we could actually really grasp that that's it. It's just, you know, love.
That's it. And it is important to have justice on the planet. So if one person badly hurts another, you have to deal with that. So you have to make sure that people don't endanger each other. So even if somebody goes to prison, but then when somebody is in prison, what do you do then? How do you deal with them? I know that in a place like Norway, for example, they are very caring in their prisons to assist people to be with the process that they're in. How do you deal with yourself when you've done these awful things?
That's really good.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's the process. I think all of us,
you
know, some of us didn't have that access or the opportunity, or sometimes, you know, they always, we need to be hit by something hard, then we will wake up, like, right, in so different many ways. Then like, okay, now I need to really find myself in that journey. And so good to hear that, you know, they're doing that in Norway. They need to do that everywhere in the world. And all the prisons, you know, it's so important. Yeah.
And to be loving to ourselves. I mean,
Mm.
when I had worked with people for 10 years, I sort of made this joke where I said, I realized how good we all are at feeling bad about ourselves.
Yes.
And then I followed it with this sentence. I said, what would have happened if in the church we would have been addressed as angels instead of sinners?
I love that. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. And I mean, this is almost a little bit tearful, but, I've worked with people for a long time. And Annie, that lack of self-worth or not feeling good about ourselves goes so deep. And very often, because the deeper part is, like Sandra was saying about school, is not necessarily always seen by schools or parents, not because they don't want to, simply because it's not in the awareness yet.
Mm.
So in that deeper part, we can feel lonely, insecure, and whatever.
Mhm.
And so what I naturally tend to do with people around me is always support that part. So support them, give them confidence, love them in that part. And people, in my experience, need a lot of love and a lot of comfort to get this feeling, is this me? That's no ego stuff. No. You need that appreciation.
Yeah.
You need that. That's a big part of my work as Louis with people.
That's why I care first.
That was the first thing I felt once I had landed in this world of perception. I kept thinking, why didn't they start in school with me at the beginning? Because with that perception open, I would have been able to study better. I might have become somebody completely else. But just for me to sit in school and try to take in all these subjects that I didn't know how they were going to help me in my life, what was the point of any of it? So I didn't do very well, I have to say, until I discovered this. And that was about me. So that's when I began to blossom. So it showed me a lot, really, of what we're actually missing and what we could start with ourselves if we want to live a completely new lifestyle and recognize not only ourselves, but recognize who everybody else is when we're in their company.
Amazing. Well, thank you both of you for your, your sharing, your insights, your experience. I think, including myself and those who are listening, we've got so much value out of it. Before we end for today, how can, if someone who's interested to learn more, or maybe if you're running your workshop, to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Well, the best way would be they can email us if you leave them their email address. The training course that we talk about, we would do whenever it was needed offline.
Right.
Right? So, but this training course we could do online. Because through Zoom you can use breakout rooms. So if you have a bunch of people who would like to be with us or do some training or whatever, I'm very happy to try that out for the first time online, but it should really work. I've done another workshop and it works fantastic on a care first subject. So people can just contact us with a question or anything they need. We work very spontaneous. We just bring things into being on request.
Yes.
That's how we work.
Yeah, I love it. The flow, and kind of also reminding me what Sandra said, the balance too. And before we end the show, any last advice or tips that you want to share to the audience before we end the show today?
I think just to add in the way that Louis and I have worked, and what makes it a specific team is that my line seems to be very clearly towards who you are in your nature. So I feel as if I'm a kind of key holder. I open the space to your higher self, your higher nature, and begin to build the person up, give them strength. And then Louis many times will come towards what is not working in life, what's breaking down, what isn't happening. So he's trying to open up a space within the physical body and the daily life so that this higher part can gradually come in and begin to live and work its way forward. So that's the way that we have most times worked when we're together as a couple. At the same time, we have done things independently. So just wanted to add that in on how that particular line works with both of us.
Yeah, for me, I think I just like to share with everyone that personally, going to that psychic school, that turned my whole life around.
Mm.
Because I felt that I was landing in my core. And I didn't just feel that was personal, like I'm psychic. Everybody has that sensitive nature. And of course, we need from it whatever we need from it. But on the level of human psychology, I think it's the core part, that heart place. So the development is really important. And one other thing I want to say that is just Sandra and I, and having been together for 36 years, being able to tune into things is incredibly handy tool. Because if we are working stuff out, in the relationship, we go and then we come to a place where we're not understanding something, then we say, shall we have a look? So and then this world, all this help comes, and we love it. We do this all the time. So Sandra and I are using this as a tool for everything, and also as a tool for healing physical things. And what I mean with that is we really feel that the body always talks. So when illness comes your way or discomfort in the body, you can read it. You can ask the body what you're needing to learn. And that's a really important part of the work that we do.
Well, thank you so much again, both of you, for just sharing. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and just being on the show, we probably, it'd be great to have both of you back to talk about I'm thinking right now at one point I want to talk, do a series interviewing couples, so that, in terms of relationship. So what you just kind of ended might be a good one also that we could focus on, how this could support couples in their relationship, in the near future.
And another thing you could another thing you could always do is, I don't know, whatever. If people have questions and you want to do a Zoom call together where they ask things, it's also possible.
Yeah, we could do the live session, and then we have them ask you a question. That would be great.
That's also possible.
Well, awesome. Thank you again. Thank you for those of you watching Reinhardt Wisdom Show today. Please remember to subscribe and follow. And if you want a more intimate conversation, we do have a Facebook group called Heart Wisdom Spiritual Group, where you can actually share more of your experiences with us. And, you have a community that supports you. Once again, Louis and Sandra, thank you from the depths of my heart for being on the show and for sharing your heart and your wisdom with all of us today. Thank you again. Have a great and amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.